our speaker today. So with us today is David Shore, who is the Senior Legal Counsel in the Securities Division at FCNB New Brunswick. So FCNB is the Financial and Consumer Services Commission, and they're a regulatory organization in New Brunswick, and I'll let David speak to it a little bit more about what he does. We're really lucky to have him here today. So he's going to talk to you about investing and touch on cryptocurrency. I have taught grade 12 for the last 15 years, and I know that my students were always really intrigued with cryptocurrency and learning about TFSAs, RRSPs, all of that sort of thing. So I'm going to hand the mic over to David, and please feel free, like I said, to engage. Mrs. Mary, you can write in the chat too if that works. So we'll get started.
Thanks very much, Jill, and good morning to Madame Mary's class, who I have live before me, and hello to everybody else who may be watching this video later recorded. It's a real pleasure to be here and to speak to you about investing and crypto today. And I really do encourage Miss Mary's class to come up and ask me questions. It'd be a lot more engaging for me, and I think for you too. So hopefully you can feel free to come up to the camera and ask questions as we go, really at any time. I'm going to share my screen because I've got a little PowerPoint presentation.
Great.
And we'll go from there. Just bear with me for one moment. Okay, and does everybody see that? Just give me a thumbs up or a nod if you see that. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. So we're going to talk about the basics of investing and Crypto 101. Okay. So just a little bit about me. Again, my name's David Shore. I'm a lawyer at FCNB. There's me in high school. I had hair then. I don't anymore, but you know, that happens sometimes. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a journalist and a writer. I thought I would write books one day. And when I went to university, I went to school for philosophy and political science, which taught me how to read and learn about the way the world works and how things fit together politically. And that really got me interested in politics and arguments, and that made me want to go to law school. So I went to law school. And after that, I was a 4-year undergraduate education after high school, followed by 3 years in law school. And then I graduated and I became a lawyer, and I started practicing law in St. John. I did 5 years with a big law firm where I went to court and argued cases, kind of like what you would see on TV. And that brought me then to getting a job here with FCNB, working to protect the public in a number of important ways around investing, which is what we're going to talk about today. So really quickly, what is FCNB? We are a Crown corporation. So what is a Crown corporation? It is an organization set up by the government to be arm's length from the government and exist as its own entity, its own corporation, but serve a public purpose. So some Crown corporations that you might be aware of, something like New Brunswick Community College. It's set up by the government, allowed to exist. It doesn't operate for profit. It operates for the purpose of trying to teach students important skills. Or NB Power, which is the public electricity utility. It's a separate company. It operates like a business, but it supplies electricity to your homes. It's very important. So FCNB is a Crown corporation that's set up to regulate the financial services industries. What does that mean? Things like people who sell insurance, people who sell investment products, people who sell mortgages. And there's actually 17 different acts, I believe, that we regulate, 17 different areas of financial services. A lot of very important things that will impact your lives one day in significant ways. The other important thing that we do is we try to provide information to the public, like what I'm doing today, about how they can interact with financial professionals, what information is out there to protect you and help you make good decisions. So we don't have a stake in the game. We're not looking to profit off of you. We're trying to give you the best possible information to protect yourselves. So I'm almost done talking about myself. But my role at FCNB, again, I'm a lawyer, so I have a legal background. I work in what's called the securities division, and securities is just a fancy word for investments. So we regulate the people that sell investment products to the public. So that means things like stocks and bonds and mutual funds. We make sure they follow the rules, and the people that create those products, we make sure that those have to follow certain rules as well. What I really like about my job, again, I've mentioned it, is that I get to work in the public interest. So every day I get to come to work, and everything I do is about making people like you safer, more protected, and have better information. So it's a lot of fun. And it's the financial services world is complex and has a lot of challenges to it. All right, so we're at investing, and here's where maybe I'm going to open it up for some questions if Madame Mary's class has any. When we were preparing for this was by far the most common question we got, just really basic. What is investing? How does it work? I certainly didn't know that when I was in grade 10 or grade 11 or 12 or grade 9. It's not something till I learned a little later, and really I wish I had learned earlier. So maybe I'll just give the kids in Madame Mary's class an opportunity. Who can tell me very briefly what they believe investing is, or what is investing?
Anyone? Make sure. I think you're still muted, Madame Mary, also, if anyone has a thought or idea.
Don't be shy.
Or if you want to share it for them, whatever you think.
So they're saying like putting your money into something and then watching it grow.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, good.
That's the fundamental is you put money aside and you hope that in the future it's going to be worth more than it is today. And that's if you understand that, then you're already off to a good start. To really understand the way investing works, though, I want to explain both sides of the equation really briefly, because for every person who puts aside money and hopes it grows, there's somebody else on the other side of that money who's using it. So investing on a big picture level is really about matching up people who have money that they don't need at the moment, that they want to put away and have it grow, with people who need money right now and want to use it. So an example I like to give, let's say, for example, I have a company that wants to make a video game. Okay, and that's a really expensive thing to do because I need to hire a whole bunch of programmers and they cost money to pay to work by the hour. And I need to pay for marketing so that everybody knows that my game is going to be released and they'll go out and buy it, and a whole bunch of other costs. I mean, offices and computers and what have you, right? So if I don't have all that money to start up a business to make video games, I need to go get it. So I could go to a bank, but I can also go to people all around Canada, all around the world, and ask for their money. And if I get enough of it, I'll pool it up, I'll use it, I'll make a product, I'll put it out in the world, I'll make money back, and then I have to go give money back to those investors. So that's really at its core what investing is about. And it's a good thing for individuals because, again, you're growing your money, but it's also a really good thing for the economy because that's what makes new businesses and new things grow, and what makes business happen. So what are the benefits of investing? It is about making your money grow. Obviously, having more money than less money sounds like a good thing, right?
Yes.
But there's two things I really want to emphasize here. And the first one, we've probably been hearing a lot lately about inflation. If anybody follows the news or talks to their parents about the news. And I wonder if anybody can tell me what inflation is. Again, I'm putting Madame Mary's class on the spot.
That's okay. Inflation, any ideas?
Can you say it loud enough? Okay. They're so shy.
That's okay.
What do you think about when you think of inflation? Yeah, the value of the money decreases, so the price of the product increases. Okay. Anyone else? Inflation? When you think of inflation, when you hear the word inflation, what do you think? Yeah, the prices are increasing, the prices go up. Yep.
That's exactly right.
Right.
And you know, the gentleman who in the black t-shirt gave a very interesting answer, because typically when people think about inflation, they think about prices going up. But of course, what that means is when prices go up for the same things, the value of our money actually goes down. So If I make $100 today, I can spend it on a, certain amount of groceries or what have you. But a year from now, those groceries will be a little bit more expensive, and that $100 isn't going to go quite as far. So I bring that up because investing is a really important part of your lives as part of a long-term strategy of how you're going to organize your finances. Because if you don't, inflation will happen. Right now, it's happening actually very fast, and that's why it's in the news, is we're seeing prices go up a lot quicker than we're used to. But even in times before the last year or so, when inflation has been really high, we have an inflation rate that's about 2% a year. That's the target we shoot for. So prices are always rising. And over a span of, your whole career, 30, 40 years, that's quite a lot of price growth. So if you take all your money and just save it, I'm going to take all my paychecks and everything I don't need to spend, I'm going to put it in cash and I'm going to store it under my mattress where nobody can find it. At the end of that 30-year period, you might not have enough to retire on or buy the things you need to buy. Investing is a really important way to ensure that your money keeps up. So it's something that you all are going to want to understand one day and appreciate how to do. When we talk about the earlier the better, there's one really important point that I want to emphasize, and you've probably heard this term before. Is anybody familiar with the term compound interest?
I think in GMF, if I'm not wrong, you cover simple and compound interest. Madame Mary, have they done that unit yet? Not yet. Well, okay. This is
okay. Well, you'll hear about it. I remember learning about it in high school, but it's a really important concept. And essentially, compound interest means if I invest money, I'm going to get a little bit of money back every year if I'm doing it well. So let's say I invest $1,000 and I make a 5% return on that $1,000 per year. So in the first year, I now have $1,050. Now in year 2, that whole $1,050 is now part of my investments, and I get 5% return on that extra little bit of money. And then in the third year, I get returns on that extra little bit of money. So that actually is a very, very powerful concept, very powerful function of how investing works. It doesn't sound like it because in the first year, well, that's only 5% on an extra $50. But over a span of 30 years, over 40 years, it really dramatically adds up. And all I'll say about this is if you want to understand a little more about compound interest, go on the internet and Google compound interest calculator and just play around with it and see what the difference is if you invest money over 20-year period versus a 30-year period versus a 40-year period. And you'll understand that you right now, being so young, have a lot of power over your lives in the future. Because if you have the opportunity to put even a little bit of money away when you're 18, 19, 20, 21 versus where I am now, I'm 34, that extra 10, 15 years that you have available, that's going to be huge, make a really big difference. So the earlier the better is important to understand, and that's really relevant to your lives right now. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different types of investments. I don't want to spend too long on this, but part of what I want to do here, you can see that I've got bonds, stocks, funds, other, and then I got crypto after other. And I've done that very deliberately because part of the pitch I'm going to make to you later is that crypto doesn't really even belong in the conversation of talking about types of investments. And in order to make that argument, I need to at least explain what I consider to be types of investments. Okay, so the two most common ones are stocks and bonds. Now, maybe just a quick show of hands. Who thinks people invest more in stocks, or who thinks people invest more in bonds? Let's see a show of hands for stocks. Let's see bonds.
Interesting.
Well, so that's what we typically hear about in the news, and what people talk about is buying stocks, the stock market, and so on. Now, the total amount of investment money out there, the market, we would say, for bonds versus stocks, Bonds is 10 times bigger.
Wow.
So it's actually a really important thing to understand. And really, a bond is just another term for a loan. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my example of a video game company. I'm trying to put out a game, and I need a lot of money so that I can pay a lot of programmers. I have basically two options. My first option is I can borrow money from people. I can say, you give me $1,000, and I'll pay you interest on that $1,000. I'll give you, again, 5%, $1,000 in a year plus another $50. That's a bond. And investors really like this because it's certain. As long as you think the company is going to succeed and going to make some money, you know that you're going to get all of your money back plus some extra. And that's called fixed income, and it's a very safe way of investing. It's often lower risk, lower reward, which means you might not make as much money, but you know you'll make some. And that's a really important function. So almost everybody's investment portfolios have some amount of bonds in them. Stocks is the other one. So let's go back to the video game company and say, you know what? I don't want to borrow all the millions of dollars that I need, because then I'm going to have to pay all that back plus interest, and I'm not going to make enough money on my profits. So I have another option. I can actually cut up my company into little pieces, and I can sell those pieces. So right now I own 100% of my company. I'm going to chop it up, and after that, I might only own 10% of the company. And a whole bunch of investors are all going to own little small pieces of a percent of the company. So what does it mean to own a piece of the company? It means you're entitled to vote on how that company is run. It means you're entitled to the profits of the company. And it means if the company winds up, if the company stops being in business, you're actually entitled to all of its stuff, or a percentage of all of its stuff. They'll sell all the stuff and then give it to investors. So the point I'm trying to make here is, if you have a bond or you have a stock, you have rights to something that the company or whoever is issuing that investment product, there's something backing it. There's a profit stream that's coming forward and giving you money for your investment. Okay. Now I want to just talk a little bit about funds, and this is a really important piece to understand about investing. If I'm an investor, and let's say, again, I'm going to keep using my example of my video game company. If I say, okay, I want to see my money grow, so I'm going to put all my money in this video game, hope it succeeds, and I'll get some money back. Do you think that's a safe strategy or a risky strategy? Let's see a show of hands for safe. Let's see a show of hands for risky. That's exactly right. It's a risky strategy. Why? And why is that? Because it's one company, right? Let's say the video game they make isn't very good and people decide not to buy it. Well, all of a sudden, that company can't pay you back. Okay? And even really big companies like a bank or like Apple or Google that are really well established, you never know what's going to happen to that company. Their value could go down and you could lose money on the stocks that you buy. It's really hard to predict the future. So a fund is just somebody who has already taken a whole bunch of different stocks and a whole bunch of different bonds and gathered them all together, and then will sell units of their fund. And the value of that fund will go up or down based on the total value of all those stocks and bonds added up. That's a much safer way of investing, because yes, one company might go out of business, or the value might go down because something unexpected happens, but it's much less likely that 300 companies in different sectors and different industries, that's all going to happen at the same time. So it balances out your earnings over time. Most people, your parents and you one day, are much more likely, and I bet almost all your parents hold some sort of funds as investments, and it's much less likely that they're buying individual stocks and bonds. Okay, so I'm just going to really touch on other, because there are other types of investments out there that aren't stocks or bonds and companies. There are things like buying real estate, buying buildings and collecting rent money. And there's other, the other types of investments out there. you don't need to worry too much about that. If you can understand how stocks and bonds work, you're well off to the races. And then crypto, again, I'm going to talk to a little later, and I'm going to make the argument that it's not really an investment at all. So is investing hard? And I've just put a couple questions on this slide that, again, that we got from students about, how does the stock market work? What do you need to know to be a smart investor? I think I'm just going to cover this at a very high level, but the real key here is investing can be easy if you do it in a safe and responsible way. And again, that kind of comes back down to what I was just talking about, buying funds that have a balance of a lot of different products, holding it over time and letting it grow. That's not particularly hard. But trading or active investing can be very hard. And what I mean by that is picking your own stocks, choosing when you buy them, choosing when you sell them, managing your own money. I think you will find, I don't know if anybody's familiar with, things like financial influencers on TikTok or Wall Street Bets on Reddit. Anybody hear of those things? A little show of hands on that. No? A few people? Well, I think you'll find as you go on in life, you will be exposed to more and more of that stuff. People that are going to try and tell you, well, just buy this stock and you're going to do really well, or you're going to miss the boat if you don't buy this crypto because it's going to go to the moon, right? Doing that yourself is very, very difficult because it's really hard to predict how the market is going to move. There's a few things you'd have to understand. On the one hand, you have to understand how to value specific companies. So you have to understand how to look at their books, how to know if they're making money, if they're expected to go up in value or down in value, read about who's managing them. There's a lot to learn and understand about those things. But even if you can do all that and master all that, you also have to understand the big picture. What's happening in the economy? Because sometimes there'll be events in the economy that are bigger than any one company, like a recession. Have anybody heard the term recession? Some people might be hearing that lately because a lot of people in the news are saying that we may be headed towards one. And when recession really just means companies have less money available, consumers have less money available, so people are spending less. And when people are spending less, companies aren't making as much money, and then values of stocks go down almost across the board, across industries and business types. So even if you pick a good company, you think this one's going to make a lot of money, you also need to predict what's happening in the market. Are things going up? Are things going down? And it's very, very hard to time all these things. So if you're taking risks with your own money by actively investing, you can lose. And you could be missing out on the value over time that you could be getting by investing responsibly. So this is something that we got a lot of questions on. I think it's very relevant to your age group. It's just, how do you get started? Okay. And this is something I didn't understand when I was your age is, okay, I want to invest, but where do I go? What do I do? Well, first of all, how old do you have to be? In New Brunswick, you need to be 19 years old to open your own investment accounts. So Madame Mary's class, anyway, you're not there quite yet, but you will be very soon. However, if you're interested in doing it now, there are a couple options. First, you could ask your parents to open a joint account and buy investments on your behalf. They would be holding on to the shares or the bonds or the funds. So you'd have to make sure that they're okay with that and that they're willing to then, transfer them to you when you become 19. But it's a good way to build experience, see how the markets work, watch your investments go up and down. The other thing you can do, you can go online and you can use play money. There's websites that have fake money that you could invest in and see what would have happened over time. And that might be a good way, risk-free, to gain some experience and see what it's like to be an investor and what would happen to money if it was your money.
There is a simulator on Investopedia that high school students sometimes like to use, and you can set it up as a contest. It's kind of neat.
And this is a really interesting time. Again, I was mentioning that we may be headed towards a recession. It might be a good time to try that because, everybody thinks they're great at investing, and everybody really likes the idea of investing when things are going well in the world, and they watch those numbers go up. But it can be a lot harder to watch those numbers go down when it's money that hard-earned money that you've worked for, and all of a sudden it's worth less than what you paid for. So experiencing that or seeing what it would be like is maybe a good thing to do when you're young. How do you know when to invest money? I think that's a really important question. And it's got, I mean, it's something that everybody thinks about. It's got a really simple answer at the end of the day. It's money that you don't otherwise need. So when you start going out into the world, you're young, you're going to go to school, some of you, or you're going to start jobs. You might want to pay rent. You're going to pay for groceries. You might want to buy a car. You're going to have lots of things you're going to need to spend money on. And that's okay. If you're using your money to buy the things you need and getting by, you don't necessarily need to be investing right away. And there's still lots of time in the world, for lots of time in your lives to get going. But if you have money available, if you're meeting your needs, you've got savings, and you say, well, I don't need this, $200 a month in my budget, that's the right time to say, well, maybe I'll put that towards investments and let it grow over time instead of buying, a new pair of sneakers or something like that. So investing kind of fits into that. If you can manage your wants and an excess spending, then you can make room for investing in your life. And again, the sooner you can do that, the more power you're going to have to watch it grow over time. How much do you need to invest? Not necessarily very much. The more you can, of course, the more it's going to grow and the more impact you're going to see in your investment. But even if you can invest $50 a month, $100 a month, small amounts, it will grow over time if you do it responsibly and give yourself enough of a time period to let it grow, and we'll see those benefits. So is investing safe? And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. I just want to highlight that investing always comes with risk. And I was talking about that. I've been talking about that throughout the presentation. But it's really important to understand that it's really, investing is a risk-reward balance. So there are everything from very safe investments where you can buy something, you can know, with almost 100% certainty that you're going to get your money back. For example, buying bonds from the government is very safe. They always pay back their loans. But because everybody knows they're safe, the government doesn't have to pay you back very much to make that enticing. So they might give you back just 2% or something like that. On the other hand, you could buy stocks in a risky, startup tech company or something like that. And you could make, multiples and multiples on your money if that company gets really big. But you could lose all your money too, because that company, might not exist in 3 years. So understanding how much risk you're willing to take on is really important to understanding what you want to invest in. And a big piece of that as well is knowing your goals and knowing the amount of time you want to invest your money. If you're say, I want to invest my money, have it grow for 3 years, and then after that, I want to use that money to put a down payment on a house or buy a car. Well, putting it in really risky, volatile stocks that can go up and down might not be the best idea, because when it comes time to make that purchase, you go to take out that money and it's gone down right now. But if you're, say, investing for retirement and you've got 40 years till you retire at 65, you can use riskier strategies, knowing that over time, those ups and downs aren't going to matter as much. And over 40 years, they're going to be much higher. So thinking about your risk and your objectives is really important when you're investing. All right, I talked about crypto, but before I do, I know I've talked about a lot of stuff about investing, and I'd like to open it up for questions from the classroom. Is there anything I talked about or anything I didn't talk about that anyone in Madame Mary's class would like to know or clarify? Any questions at all?
So I just have a question. So if someone has money that they want to, let's say, buy stocks with, and let's say they don't know anything about them. Is that something that you do, or is there somebody who kind of advises some good ones to buy for the money that you want to invest in stocks?
So that's a great question, Madame Mary, and actually thank you for asking that, because I did want to touch on it. There's a lot of different stuff to talk about here, but that kind of that's a really good question. Where do you go to invest? How do you actually take your money and put it, get those stocks or bonds or funds or what have you? Well, there's two main routes to that. And so I don't do it. I work for the government, and I actually work in a role where I regulate all the people that do this. So by regulate, I mean I supervise them. I make sure they follow certain rules. And then if they break the rules, we get involved and we see what we need to do about that. So it keeps people honest and accountable. But investment advisors, financial professionals, there are lots of people out there. You can find them at banks. You can find them at specialized investment firms. And what they'll do is they will take your money and put it into the right products, and they'll have discussions with you, talk to you about what you're trying to achieve, what you want to do with your money, and then give you advice, give you recommendations on the right types of products, the right types of funds to put your money into. There's a lot of advantage to working with financial professionals because they do this stuff full time. They follow the markets, they research products, they know what to recommend. They also come at a cost. These people do it for a living, so of course they're going to make some money. And how do they make money? They get a little bit of your returns, typically. So you're hoping that when you're working with a professional, they're going to make the right recommendations. They're going to grow your money more than you could do it yourself and make up for the difference between taking their 1% fee off the growth of your funds. A lot of them do that, and it can be a very worthwhile and appropriate strategy to work with a professional. But you need to understand that you are paying that person and it's coming out of the money you would otherwise be making. The other strategy is to do self-directed investments. And I was just talking about earlier that can be the riskier strategy if you're trying to do active investing. But there are ways to do passive investing where you're buying the same fund every month or every couple weeks from your paycheck. And you can do that right now. There's more options than there ever have been. There are lots of apps and websites that let you basically cut out the middleman and let you go directly towards the financial products. So there are things like robo-advisors like Wealthsimple and Questrade, and there are online discount brokerages that will charge you much smaller fees to make those investments than you would with a professional. But you also wouldn't necessarily get that advice and the ability to call up a person and talk to them and ask them questions.
Great.
Other
Thanks,
questions before we talk about crypto?
I think we have maybe about 10 minutes left. If that works for you, David, this is great. I'm excited for this part, crypto.
Perfect. Yeah. So let's talk about it because it's really important. And I think especially people your age, young people, are really excited by the idea of crypto. It's been emerging as something new and being pitched to the world as a type of investment. Now, again, I've been saying that I'm going to make the argument it's not really an investment. What I think crypto is essentially gambling. Okay. Now, to get to that point, I want to explain, what is a cryptocurrency? And maybe I'll open up to Madame Mary's class to get an impression. What do you understand cryptocurrency is?
Any ideas?
Any ideas? What is crypto?
Anything, whatever. Yeah, so someone saying it's like money online. So it's not real money that you hold in your hand.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Good answer.
I don't even have an answer because I don't know.
Well, so that I think that's what it is billed at or is trying to be, is digital money. In reality, it hasn't really turned out that way. to explain what crypto is, I'm going to talk about what underpins it, and it's called a blockchain. So what's really novel about cryptocurrency, what's new about it, what makes it a technology, is actually not the cryptocurrency itself, but the way it is transferred and traded between people, and that's called a blockchain. So Bitcoin, of course, was the first one. I'm sure everybody's heard of Bitcoin. And what made Bitcoin special is somebody who actually is anonymous, they call themselves Satoshi, put out a paper explaining that, hey, there's this concept I have called a blockchain that I think we can do with computers. Basically, it means instead of keeping records in one place, so a ledger, with regular money, you'd say, okay, we've printed this much money. The Bank of Canada is going to keep track of of how much is out there. So you've got one central thing, one central company or entity that's keeping track of it all. With cryptocurrency, we can do the same thing, but we can do it shared across a whole bunch of different computers so that no one person, no one computer, no one company or government controls that cryptocurrency. And we do that by having a big line of code that every computer validates exists. And every time somebody transfers anything to a new computer or a new person, we're just going to add on to that code. And a whole bunch of computers are going to collectively look at that code and say, yep, it looks good, it's right. And that's going to make the transaction official. So that's essentially what a blockchain is. And for a blockchain to work, you need to have something that's transferred between people. The code is the technology, and the something just makes the technology work. And that something is the Bitcoin. So it's just a little bit of code that says, okay, we have a token, and I can give it to somebody else. And then we're going to add some code to the blockchain, and now that other person owns that code, that token. So really, that token can be worth anything. It doesn't have any inherent value. So again, I talked about stocks. Those have inherent values because it's a chunk of a company. Or a bond, that has value because it's a contract to get money back. Your token that's on a blockchain, its only value is that somebody else wants it. So when Bitcoin first started out, it was worth, fractions of pennies. And it showed that people could trade them back and forth. I'll pay you a few cents. I'll get my token. Hey, this is really neat. Over time, it has snowballed. Where, well, if we're gonna keep doing these transactions, if I'm gonna give you my Bitcoin, well, I want, twice what I paid for it. So I want a few more pennies. Right. Now, if I'm gonna transfer it again, now I want $1. It got all the way up to last year, one Bitcoin was worth $60,000 or so American, or about $75,000 in Canadian dollars. Wow. A crazy amount of money for one little electronic token that, again, has no inherent value. So what do I mean, again, by no inherent value? It could be worth $0 tomorrow. The only thing that's preventing Bitcoin from being worth $0 is that people think somebody else will buy it. Right. And people are buying it because they think that they can hold on to it and wait for it to be worth even more and get somebody else to buy it, and they'll make more money. So that act of buying something only to hope it goes up in value when there's nothing inherent underneath it, that's called speculation. And another word for speculation is gambling. So yes, you will hear a lot of things in the world, and you probably may already be hearing it, people saying, invest in cryptocurrency. It's a way to make money. It's decentralized. Governments don't control it. You need to understand that is a very, very risky thing to do. Because yes, that cryptocurrency could go up in value and you could sell it and make some money off of that. It could go down in value and it could go all the way down and you could lose all the money that you put into that crypto. And it's very, very unpredictable. Now, just to hammer that point home, the second largest cryptocurrency platform in the world, it's called FTX, just announced this week, essentially that that has no money and it's insolvent. It can't meet its obligations. And a whole bunch of people went on to FTX to try and take away their crypto, and it froze transactions. And that has caused a huge ripple in the crypto world. Now, that's the second largest entity, the second largest company, announcing that it couldn't even give people their money back. So that's a word of warning for every person you see driving around in a Ferrari and talking about all the money they made off of crypto. The people who lose all their money, they don't want to talk about it. But there's a lot more people losing than there are winning. So I'm here to say my message to you, if you take nothing else out, is that there's a responsible way to invest, or there's risky gambling ways to invest. I would encourage you to do the responsible way. It doesn't really involve crypto.
David, that's the best explanation of crypto I've ever heard. Really, it's always been kind of an ambiguous concept to me, but you really explained it well. And it is a topic that students are buzzing about in the classroom. So it's great that you explained it so well. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I mean, I know it's interesting and it's enticing. And I think a lot of the enticement comes from when you're young, you see these new technologies growing and you see the, you want to be an early adopter. And we've seen things, like the internet. And we had naysayers about the internet. Oh, well, these computers are all talking to each other, but it's not going to go anywhere. No, it's not going to get adoption. And of course, the people who saw that the internet had a lot of opportunity made a whole lot of money. And now we can do things that I can talk to a classroom from my office, and we never dreamed that could be doable. Right. But just because something is a new technology doesn't necessarily mean it's going to take off, doesn't mean it's going to be more valuable tomorrow than it is today. You really have to look at what it actually is and what it does.
Sure. Thank you so much. This has been so valuable. Madame Mary's class, do you feel like you've learned something new this morning? Or kind of learned the ins and outs of investing and how to safely approach it?
Yes, thank you so much. That was very informative, even for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
It's great. Thank you so much for participating, and thank you to David for giving up your time. I know that your time is precious, and we really appreciate you volunteering and doing this for our students.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording here.